Hi, welcome to the next lesson. Before we get into the next lesson, we're going to recap lesson 1, which was linear equations and intercept. We learned that linear equation is an equation that forms a line when graphed. Move this up. The standard form is ax plus by equals c. For example, if you have 5x plus 3y equals 4. X and by are the variable terms. So you have the number with the variable, x and y, or either. And then c is a number that stands alone. It's a constant, and it has no variable. We also did in the last lesson if it was linear or not linear. So we got 3 examples. Is this a linear? No, because that's x squared. Is this a linear equation? Yes. And if we had to write it in standard form, it would be 4x minus y equals 8. And is this a linear equation? No, because of the x and y. It's supposed to be a number and y. And again, sorry about the noise. So we also learned about x-intercept and y-intercept. So with x-intercept, the x-coordinate of a point that is x-coordinate of a point at which the graph of the equation crosses the x-axis. And the y-intercept is the y-coordinate of a point at which the graph of the equation crosses the y-axis. Alright, so there are 2 practice questions. They want us to find the x and y-intercept of the following equations. So for this one, in order to find the x, we have to make the y 0, and in order to find the y, we have to make the x 0. So if you were to do the work, plug it in, you would get your x-intercept as negative 2.40 and a y 0, comma negative 3. And the same thing with this one. So in order to find the y-intercept, you plug in this to make it 0. So then once you do that, you divide by 3, you will have y equals 3, and then in order to find the the x-intercept, you would make this 0, and then you would solve, and then you would get a fraction. So the x-intercept would be 1.5, comma 0, and then y-intercept would be 0, comma 3. Alright, let's go on to our next topic, which is graphing linear equations. And the objective is, how do we graph linear equations? So in order to graph using a table, we select the values from the domain and make a table. So remember what domain was? Domain is x, your x values. If the x coefficient is a fraction, then pick a number that is a multiple of the denominator. So you're going to have one where, let's say if you have 4 over 3x plus 5 equals whatever, you would choose your x as multiple of 3's because your denominator is 3, so you would choose like 3, 6, 9, any multiples of 3. Just so that way you can make the fraction smaller, and we get rid of the fraction and then find your y. The next, substitute x values chosen in the equation, then solve for y. And there's going to be a column where you write the x and the y values in coordinate form, because those are your points that you're going to plot on the graph. Then you plot your points and connect them, label your line, and place your arrows. Alright, so we have an example. This is the one that has the fraction with the x. So we have y equals a third x plus 2. So the values that I chose for x were negative 3, 0, and 3. You can choose negative numbers positive as well as positive numbers. In this case, based on how big your graph is, you will have to choose the right x so that way you can find the points on the graph. There are times you may choose a certain number even though it's small, but then your y will be big and it's not on the graph. So always be careful of what number you choose. But in this case, when it comes to making the table, you can choose whatever number. So once you do that, then you plug it in. Notice how I chose multiple of 3's. I chose 3 for that one because I wanted to end up with a number that's not going to be a fraction. So I did that for 0 and I did that for 3. I simplified and I found my y for each of them. Once I did my x, I found my y, I put it into xy coordinate form, because this way I will be able to plot it on the graph. So I'm going to expand. Ooh, I thought that would not make this whole thing bigger. Oh, let me try again. So I'm going to move the graph. You see the green dots? Those are my points that I found by choosing my x and finding y. And then I connect them, made my line, labeled it, and that was it. So that's how you graph the equation of a line. Okay, let's go on to the next one. We got 3x equals y. So again, these are my x's that I chose. I plugged it into the equation, 3x. I found my y. And then I put it into the xy coordinate form. So once I found my coordinates, I plotted it on the graph, which I will do. So let me expand this and then start plotting on the graph. Let me choose red so that we can see it through this faint line. So we got -1, -3. That's my first point. Then 0, 0. Then 1, negative, and 1, +3. And then 2, 6. And now I draw my line. Line. And I'm going to connect the dots, and I'm going to put my arrows. Pen. And then, of course, I have to label the line. And I'll label that in red, so that way you know you need to label it. So 3x equals y, and that's my line. Or if you had y equals 3x, that's fine. As long as you're sticking with the original that was given, then you're good. Alright, next one. So they have y minus 8 equals -x. Remember when you had to find the slope and the y-intercept? This is the same thing, especially with graphing. You have to put this into the y equals mx plus b format. So you change that, and then you should end up getting y equals -x plus 8. Once you have it in this form, now you can choose your x, which I chose -1, 0, 1, and 2. I plugged it into wherever there's an x, I plug in my numbers that I chose. Found my y's by solving it. And then I turn it into the xy coordinates. These are my points that I'm going to plot on the graph. So I have -1, 9. I have 0, 8. I have 1, 7. And then I have 2, 6. Then I make my line, connect the dots by drawing a line. Then I'm going to make sure your line is long, no nuggets. Nuggets, those little small lines, and then that's it. No, I want to see long lines. And then you put your arrows, and then you label your line. Get into the habit of putting arrows and labeling your line. Make sure you use the original, not what you changed it to. Use the original. So it would be y minus 8 equals -x. Right, not too bad. Let's go on to the next one. And remember, during this video, if I'm going too fast, you can always pause, slow it down, catch up, and then let's move on. Alright, the next one. Me choose select. This is not in its y equals mx plus b form. Remember, we're not doing standard form, which would be the x and the y's on one side and then the 10 on the other. We have to do y equals mx plus b. So when we do that, we do the work to show. So we got this, subtract 10 on both sides, and divide -1 on both sides, and then we have y equals -x plus 10. I have my y behind here, but it doesn't matter if it's in front or back. as long as this expression is correct. So I write that here, choose my x. So sometimes you can go 1, 2, 3, 4. I did skip like 2, 4, 6, 8, something like that. That's fine. As long as you have all the points you need in order to get your line, then you're good. So you plug it in. Now what you noticed was this is a negative. But notice how the x has a negative already, the original negative. That negative, anytime you have a negative number, always put it in a parentheses. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to put the 2, you would place the 2 right in the x, not and disregard that it was a negative. And then you have a total different number. And your graph would look weird. So be careful. Anytime you have a negative number, put it in parentheses. And if there was an existing negative there, then just place it in the front. Then you would distribute, of course. I'll give you a positive 2, and then I'll give you 12, and then you have your other numbers. And then you put it in coordinate form, and then you will plot your points. So for this one, the 12 is not there. I have negative 2, but 12. So I'm just going to leave that out. I have the other numbers. So 0, 10. I have 2, 8. And then I have 4, 6. And be careful when you're plotting. If you're skip counting, make sure that the next one number, you don't have it on 1, and let's say 1, you have 0, 10, and the next one is 2, 8, but you accidentally put in a 1, 8. Be careful. Whatever you choose, whatever x you choose, you have to stick to that and use the y's that are given based on your x. Because if you don't, then again, your line is going to be extra weird, and you're going to have to find out what you did wrong. And like I said, I couldn't plot a negative 2 and 12, but if I have 3 other points, I know that my line will pass through that point. And make sure your line is straight, not crooked, not curved, not weird, because if you have weird lines, you will get points off for that. Make sure your line is straight. And then again, use your original equation that was given from the beginning, not what you changed it to. Okay, next one. Same thing. This one is already in its y equals mx plus b format. So I choose my x's. My x's, and then I plug it in. And I get my y's. I know this one's not going to be on the graph, but I have the 3 others that I can use. Then I have my coordinate points, so that's what I'm going to plot on the graph. First one, negative 1, 8. Next one, 0, 0. The next one, 1, negative 8. So I'm good enough. As long as you have two or 3 lines, then you should be good. And then I'm going to connect my dots. Connect the points. I'm going to make sure that this one lines up. And I'm going to draw my my arrow for this. And then label it, which is y equals negative 8x. And you notice that the slope, if you know what the slope is, if you said negative 8, that is correct. And it's negative, so that means my slope has to be negative. When you read in the graph left to right, so let me expand that so you can see it. When you're reading it left to right, you're starting at the mountain, and you're going down. Or you're falling down if you tripped over a rock. So negative slope, because it got the negative 8. Alright, next one. We got x equals negative 2. We get select. So that means all the x, I'm not going to choose any different x's because my x is negative 2. So that means I can choose any y. So for this one I chose y, negative 1, negative 0, 1, 2. Then I just put it in coordinate form. So anytime you see an equation like this, where you have x equals whatever or y equals whatever, you already have your x's, just choose y's. If you have y equals whatever it is, then choose your x's. Do your coordinate forms, and then you plot. And then for this one, use my red pen. So all my x's are negative 2. So then I have negative 1, 0, negative 2, 1, negative 2, 2. You notice what's going on? If you said that we're going to have a straight line which is vertical, you're correct. Because I remember when we did the lesson, when we were talking about different types of lines, if you have x equals whatever, it's going to be a vertical line. Oops, that should have been black. And if you have y equals a number, it's going to be horizontal. So this is a vertical slope, undefined slope. So anytime you have x equals whatever number, it's going to be a vertical line. Always remember that. And another way to think about it, if you weren't too sure, when you have x between x equals, let's say x equals negative 2 and x equals negative, y equals negative 2, which one can you graph on your graphing calculator? You can graph the y equals negative 2, and it will always show you what the graph looks like, which is horizontal. When you cannot graph this on your calculator, so that's the one that's going to be a vertical line. So now speaking of y equals, we got y equals negative 4, and we have our y's, which is negative 4. So you can't choose anything different from negative 4. Then we can choose any x's that we want to match up with our negative 4. Once we do that, then we put in a coordinate form, and then we plot. So if you recognize what was happening for the other graph, that it was vertical, then you know that the y equals 4 will be horizontal. So we look for the negative 4. So we got negative 1, negative 4, and then we got 0, negative 4, and then so forth. So then you draw the line. You know it's going to be a horizontal line. Again, draw your arrow, and then label your line. So that'll be y equals negative 4. So remember, y equals whatever number is going to be horizontal, and x equals whatever number is going to be vertical. Alright. So this ends. We've reached the end of this lesson. And just to recap, we were talking about graphing equations. So basically, if I extend this one, we went through the steps about you have your equation. If your equation is not in this format, y equals mx plus b, change it into that. Once you do that, choose your x's, plug it into the equation, find your y, then you have your coordinates. Once you have your coordinates, plot it on the graph, connect the dots, and put your line, your arrows, and then label it. Same thing here. That's what we all did. And when you have, like I said, if it's not in the y equals mx plus b, change it. And when you do graph it with the original equation, not what you changed it to. And also, when you have x equals negative 2, x equals a number, or y equals a number, for x equals a number, it's always a vertical line. And if it's y equals whatever number, it's always a horizontal line. Alright, this ends our lesson, and have a nice day.